Deputy Pringle.
I welcome the opportunity to contribute to the debate tonight on the Mortgage Restructuring Arrangement Bill 2013. And I would like to commend Deputy Collins and their team for putting this bill together and bringing it before the House tonight. As has been outlined, this bill is modelled on the legislation that was introduced in Norway in the 1990s after their housing bubble there to relieve the debts of embattled homeowners and to ease the burden on them. And that is something that we need to be looking at in this country as well and to be repeating. This legislation guarantees the security of a family home, which means that families that are in mortgage distress will not suffer the threat of being put out of their house. Their home will be protected. It removes the veto from the banks over the insolvency arrangements that can be entered into to ensure that the banks do deals with families in distress and ensure that the mortgage elements of the debt is written down and an affordable solution is put in place. And it deals with the negative equity of people who are in arrears on their mortgage debt as well. And those are the three key themes of this legislation, and I think that's vitally important and should be a key theme of the government policy as well in dealing with mortgage distress in this state. As I said, this legislation was put in place in Norway in the 1990s and has been modified for the Irish situation, taking into account the personal insolvency arrangements which have been incorporated into the bill to assist in dealing with people dealing with their debt. And also recently, in recent years in Iceland, a similar procedure has been put in place there where the mortgage was refixed at the market value plus 10% and made manageable for people in arrears. And that's what we need to be doing here. The personal insolvency arrangements, clearly in the media coverage over the last number of weeks, it shows that they won't work for people, and the fact that they won't even be accessible for people, which is even more disturbing, I think, out of that personal insolvency legislation, where we see that maybe only 1 in 7 people will actually be able to put up what could be up to €7,000 up front to engage a personal insolvency practitioner so that they can deal with their debts. Indeed, many people, if they had €7,000 to put up front, would be dealing with their mortgage with that money rather than using it to get a personal insolvency practitioner. And I think the reason that this bill is necessary is because over the last 5 years we have seen that the banks are literally calling the shots in this state. The previous government in September 2008, when they introduced a bank guarantee, the heads of AIB and Bank of Ireland came into government buildings in their fancy suits and talked to Brian Cowan and Brian Lenihan, and lo and behold, they introduced a bank guarantee. But we also see in the lifetime of this government that the banks come in and talk to the government and they call the shots and they dictate the pace. We saw it in the personal insolvency legislation where it was amended at report stage so that to allow the banks to extend the time that somebody could be in an arrangement. If somebody was lucky enough to be perhaps for their fortunes to change and start to improve over the 3 years of an insolvency arrangement, the banks could go back for another bite of the cherry and extend that period for another 5 years. So we have been kowtowing to the banks for too long in this country, and we need some form of legislation backup to be able to force the banks into doing deals with people. Because the voluntary system clearly isn't working. The governor of the central bank last Friday told the finance committee that the banks are supposed to have issued 35,000 sustainable solutions to people. But we discovered that 62% of those so-called sustainable solutions were voluntary surrender of their houses so that they could be sold off at the bank's will. So this is the sustainable solutions that this government wants the banks to put in place, where people voluntarily will be forced into giving up their houses. And that is not a solution that we should be doing. And what we should be doing is using legislation to force the banks into a situation where they have to do deals with people. Because the only way that we'll get out of this crisis and the only way that we can bring some vitality and life back into the economy is if we can get the millstone of mortgage debt off people's necks.
2 minutes.
And ease.
Go on, mate.
Sorry?
Two
Two minutes, thank you. And we need to ease the burden on them. And that is the only way we can do it. And there will be talk, I suppose, of moral hazard from the other side of the House throughout this debate over the next 2 nights. But the real moral hazard is in not doing anything. And the real moral hazard is letting the banks continue the way they're going now and offering solutions where people have to voluntarily surrender their houses. I think it's the bigger moral hazard against society not to do this and not to force the banks into write-down situations. We see figures from the central bank in June this year where 79,000 mortgages have been restructured, but yet only 42,000 of them are not in arrears at that time. So of the 79,000 restructured, 37,000 are back in arrears again. They are not sustainable solutions. And the Governor Hon said last Friday as well, he said, despite all our efforts and despite real progress in policies, processes and staffing, far too many arrears cases have still remained untreated. And why have they remained untreated? Because the banks don't have to do anything. They just have to sit tight and they force families to deeper and deeper debt, and then they'll actually go in and take the houses and sell them off and leave families on the social housing list, as Deputy Daly has outlined. What we need is legislative role to force banks into doing deals. And I also believe that what we should be doing and what the government should be doing is getting rid of the subprime lenders out of this market as well. By going in and forcibly taking over their loans, we own the AIB Bank. Why not buy the mortgage debts off these subprime lenders and take them into the AIB Bank where they can be dealt with and we can force a proper restructuring on them? Because unless we do that and unless we remove the burden from our citizens, our economy will not recover and we'll be in years and years of stagnation. And what we need to do is give people the wherewithal to be able to manage the debt that they can afford and to be able to participate fully in our society again. Thank you.